It's a little bit after 6, so I think we'll go ahead and start this evening. I want to welcome everyone to the Ennis Heritage Society's lecture series. This is the second lecture in our series for this winter of 2026. We had one on the Dust Bowl in January. We have this one tonight, and I am really pleased to see you all. This is quite a good turnout. I'm going to say it's because of the great weather, not because of me. And then we have another one the third Thursday in March. That's March 19th, and that will be on the history of Alma, Texas. So hopefully you all mark your calendars to come back for that one a month from tonight. So we'll go ahead and get started. And for those of you who haven't been to any of our programs before, one of our things is to always start our programs with an invocation. And I will be doing that tonight. So if you all will bow your heads, please. Heavenly Father, we know that you are eternal, and in your wisdom made the passage of time and appreciation of our past important to us, your creation. Watch over us this evening as we recall our shared history and seek to better understand your ways. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much. First off, I'd like to thank the Ennis Public Library for making this wonderful space available to us. We're very, very appreciative of the library renovations and that this space is open and available to us. One thing is, one of the reasons we do our programs on Thursday evenings here is because this is the evening that the library is open till 8 o'clock. So, but at 5 to 8, I'm going to chase you all out, okay? Because that was a little bit of a problem last time. So if you would do that, and then the other thing. So we have 4 speakers this evening. So hopefully we'll be able to get through this entire program. And I would like for you all to hold your questions until the last speaker. That's partly so that we can keep the program moving, and also because you might have a question of the first speaker that the second speaker plans on talking about. So this is a little bit ambitious for us to do all 4 folks, but we're going to do it this way tonight. Who all here was born after 1993? Okay. So this is history to you all. The Superconducting Super Collider is definitely history to you all. I may have said this to some of you before, but history has 3 different phases. It's what happened yesterday, that is a shared experience for all of us. What has happened in the recent past that we may not have experienced ourselves, but someone we know was there firsthand to experience it and can share that with us. Your parents, your grandparents, and all that. And then there's the history that ends up in history books. Well, tonight's program is that middle period. It's that period where many people here in this room might have remembered the time when the Superconducting Super Collider was going to be something in our community. And so we're blessed tonight to have 4 people who also were here and were integrally involved with that. And if I may, I'll introduce all 4, and then we'll just come up in order. Catherine Gannon began her involvement with the Superconducting Super Collider while working with the City of Ennis and the SSC Authority, where she assisted in compiling the Ellis County proposal to the Department of Energy. Once Ellis County was selected, she managed public affairs for the Texas National Research Lab Commission and later served in the administration of the SSC Lab under Dr. Roy Schwitters. Jeff Gannon began his career in 1968 during the early construction of the Fermi Lab particle accelerator located in Illinois. 21 years later, he left Fermi Lab to join the SSC here in May of 1988 as a senior electrical engineer, where he designed and specified accelerator equipment. Sugar Glaspy served as a relocation coordinator for the SSC Lab, welcoming scientists and researchers to Texas from other labs within the U.S. and internationally. She had the reverse role for the project when it was canceled in 1993. And then our fourth speaker, Bruce Fowler, was a historic resources surveyor for the company of Hardy Heck Moore of Austin, who was engaged to document every historic structure in Ellis County as part of the program. A subsequent survey phase included a more in-depth research and documentation of the structures that were directly affected by the construction of the Superconducting Super Collider. So our guests may correct me on what I've just said right now, but hopefully we'll learn a lot from them. So first up is Catherine Gannon. Please come up.
Thank you, David. Good evening. This is just wonderful to have so many people interested. And we ran into another ex-employee that we hadn't seen in many years back there. So my talk this evening is hopefully going to share how Texas and Ellis County became involved in the Super Collider project. And then I'm also going to share a lot of my personal involvement in the project and how it changed the course of my life in the end. Big time, yeah. The mic is on. Am I not talking loud enough? No. Oh. Okay, Casey, shall I just hold it up? Okay.
The mic is this present program is being video recorded, and the mic is to the video recording.
I'll try to talk loud until they get it figured out. So 40 years ago, it's hard to believe, but that's when this whole project began. In the state of Texas, President Reagan approved a proposal to send to Congress for the Superconducting Super Collider with the goal of advancing America's technology, science and technology. And then from there, in 1985, Governor Clements established the Texas National Research Laboratory, better known as TNRLC, and that organization will play a big part as we go through this. And their role was to evaluate the sites and to lobby to Congress for the Super Collider project to come to Texas. They held their first public meeting, and they solicited proposals from different sites around Texas, and it ended up that there were 14 locations, including Ellis County, that submitted proposals or expressed interest in bidding for it. And each of those 14 then had 3 months to prepare their proposal to go back to the commission, and then from there they would sort them out and figure out who was going to be actually going to national, to DOE. And then at the beginning of all of this, the North Texas Commission, some of you will be familiar with that, but they were originally formed to bring the coalition of Dallas and Fort Worth and Ellis County and surrounding counties to build the DFW airport. And they had pretty much completed their mission there, and they were looking for something else to get involved in, and this happened along and met the criteria of science and technology, which was a big part of what they like to get involved in. And then the third organization is the SSC Authority, and that was formed as a 501c3 nonprofit, was organized for the purpose of preparing the bid that was going to go, the Ellis County bid that was going to go to the state of Texas. Steve Howerton was the organizer for Ellis County, or for Ennis, and Stan Lambert, Mike Montgomery were other directors on the 501c3 on the SSC Authority, and myself. And then there were corporate CEOs and DFW mayors. We had Jack Evans, the former mayor of Dallas, was our president. Mayor Annette Strauss, Bob Bolin from Fort Worth were very, very active and attended all of our board meetings. Again, it was a 3-month period. It was very tight, but everybody was interested. Everybody was pulling together to make it happen. So during this time, I was working for the City of Ennis at that time for Steve Howerton as a Main Street manager and economic development manager. And for the SSC Authority during this 3-month period, meeting organization and minutes were my primary role as secretary. And with no computer in those days, or cell phones, which is just hard to believe, but how far we've come. So I primarily had to rely on an antiquated typewriter and fax machines to send out all my meeting notices to these and all of the documents of minutes, etc. And which probably would have been much more efficient had I had a computer. We had regular weekly board meetings of the SSC Authority, and I lost my place. And many subcommittee meetings. They had to break up into different topics that sub people would work on and go away and come back and report to the group. And then actually preparing the proposal for Ellis County that would be submitted to the state. Steve Howerton, I had a slide for that. Excuse me just a minute. So this obviously is a much younger Steve Howerton, and Edwin Farah from Waxahachie Real Estate was one of the first to raise his hand and be involved in this. Mike McKinney with Texas Utilities, and gosh, there were a lot of others. Buck Jordan, a chamber manager of Waxahachie, and Sugar Glaspy, and Bob Duke, Edwin Farah. Does that help? Oh, yes. Yay! I won't have to holler. Thank you, David.
Good job.
So all of these people that I just mentioned just worked tirelessly to get all of the data together. We had to raise money to go out and do some drilling to determine the depth of the Austin Chalk and lots of different geological things and environmental tests that had to be done, because all of that data had to be included in our proposal to the state. So that was all during this time for committee meetings and trying to get it all together. So then we finally were to the point that we thought we had all of the data that we needed to put in this proposal, and we had to get it produced and submitted to Austin. And we had, which was quite an effort, at the City of Ennis copy machine, we had to copy 12,000 pieces of paper and collate them, of course. And we ran this copy machine for 12 hours, and we had to keep turning it off to cool it down because it would overheat. We anticipated this because I guess they'd had some problems on it before, and Steve had lined up the copy repairman to be on standby, so that really helped. And we had turned the air conditioning down to cool the room. And then, oh, by the way, they had a city commission meeting that night, so we had to stop copying while they met because I think it was in that same room where they held the meetings. So we got it all done. They were in 4-inch binders that were just crammed full of maps and test data and lots of thick documents that had to be included, and that was all criteria that was mandated that had to be included if it was going to be good. So once we had all of these books done at 1 a.m., we loaded them all into Edwin's car, and he drove off and got them down to Austin before they opened up the next morning. So we were quite exhausted and relieved that we got it done. So then the next, let's see, there were 14, I think I told you there were 14 proposals submitted around the state, and we all went down to Austin to hear the result of who won. It was kind of like the Academy Awards. I mean, it was a big deal. And it was narrowed down. They decided to select 2 sites to send to DOE instead of just 1. So we shared that award with Amarillo and then Ellis County as finalists. Nationwide, there were 43 proposals submitted to Washington, to the Department of Energy. Then in January of '88, the most qualified list of the DOE was narrowed down to 7 proposals. And Ellis County, then Amarillo dropped out, and Ellis County was the one that was chosen to represent Texas. Now that they had selected us, the Department of Energy had to come down and do an on-site review. In fact, they had to go around and do all 7 of these sites, but Steve was in charge of getting an air transportation together to get all these DOE representatives to go down and tour the site. Most of the easiest and best way to see it was through the air. So if you were just to drive it, it would take you forever. So we used a lot of helicopters and buses and cars to get all of this whole contingency from the Department of Energy down to the site, and had other meetings in DeSoto. And then they had a public hearing where they were soliciting public support trying to test the public support from Ellis County as to. So we recruited over 100 Ennis citizens to speak to the Department of Energy in favor of the site. I'm not sure whether we might have had 1 or 2 that didn't say anything good, but we'll about that. And then we had the SSC Authority arrange, this was kind of a fun one, we arranged a media event for publicity to garner support and for the project. And this was to be helicopter tours. We had a relationship with Bell Helicopter, and they were generous enough to supply for us the helicopters and, of course, pilots. And the idea was that we had 6 helicopters, and on each one we would have a dignitary. Okay, talk faster. Okay, but I had microphone problems. We had a tour guide, we had a government dignitary like mayors or chamber people, and then all the rest of the seats were filled up with press. So I was on one of the helicopters, and Joe Barton was my dignitary, and he sat in the front seat with the pilot, and I was in the middle in the back seat, and I had 2 young press people on either side of me. And we're finally taking off, and the guy on my right said, "Oh, I'm going to be sick." So I'm tapping Joe, and I said, "Is there anything up there he can use?" And he said, "Here, take my cap." And he did, and he used it. So that was one of my fun helicopter tours. I did a lot more of them a little later. Finally, DOE announced in November 10th of 1988, and I've got a newspaper front page story over there on 1988 that we were selected.
You want me to do that for you?
Yeah, I should be on number 5. Oh, that was, yeah, keep going.
Oh, another?
Okay, I guess you can just stop there. Yeah, the land one where we sold the first piece of property is what we're looking for. There we go. So part of the proposal, the state of Texas was to provide all of the money and the work to provide for the land acquisition, utilities, buildings, roads, etc. Ultimately, there were to be 17,000 acres that were involved, or 1,100 parcels of land. And this is a shot of the first parcel that was sold in June of 1990, and we had a big press event out in the middle of a cornfield in the summertime. And so then I began organizing. I had gone to work at that point. I went to work for TNRLC after we got the site won. I moved over and went to work for TNRLC as their public affairs coordinator, and began organizing a series of 12 public meetings throughout Ellis County. Some of you may have been at one of those. And then following after that, we got through the first 12 wave. Then we had less frequently ones, but continued that. Established a speakers bureau with slideshow, and I went on the road, and several of our execs did to spread the word and answer questions. There were a lot of questions about land and a lot of homeowners that were being affected. And then in our offices, I set up an information center for new hires, these new people that were coming in to work at the lab, that from all over, and a lot of them were international and from other states. And we had compiled information about housing and school data, etc. And then during this process, I did several different helicopter tours for congressmen and other dignitaries. The TNRLC offices were on Hampton Road, and we were in a 5-story building, and behind the building there was a big open field. So when we needed to do a helicopter tour, we would request that they land right behind the building, which made it very, very convenient. We could have whoever we're taking up just come to the office, and then when the chopper was there, we'd run out. And like I said, that was the best way to see the site. In 1991, I moved from TNRLC to the SSC Laboratory, and Roy had a conference, a major physics conference, that what originally was to have been in Moscow, but they had withdrawn, and he had raised his hand and said, well, we don't have a site yet, but we'd like to host this 26th International Conference on High Energy Physics. We held the actual meetings at SMU, and we did all kinds of activities associated with that in Ellis County and around. there were over 1,400 attendees from 70 different countries. And that was in August of '92. And so that was a special project that I worked on. And once that was completed, then Dr. Schwitters asked me to come in and work in his office as his assistant, which was a really exciting time. It was a busy, busy office, as you can imagine. And the people were interesting, so interesting, because we'd have Nobel laureates and very prominent physicists coming to meetings there and in and out of his office. Congressional delegates, President Bush, Moshe Safdie, who is an internationally known architect. And this is just a little story I have to share. He and Roy had spent the day going down to the site to look at how they might lay out the actual laboratory and how it would fit into the terrain. And they had come back to the office late in the afternoon, and Moshe came in and he said, "Catherine, I need your help." And I said, "Well, okay, what is it?" And he said, "Well, I've torn my pants." He had crawled through some bush, and the whole back end of his leg was ripped. So we decided to when he was getting ready to go to the airport to get on a plane, but we decided to use the stapler. And I stapled up his pants, and he was off to the airport. So I presume he made it okay. But he actually designed, if any of you have been to the Crystal Bridges Art Museum in Bentonville, I know a few of you have, which is a beautiful, beautiful museum, and how they use the nature incorporated in it. During this period of time, I met a widower named Jeff Gannon, and we married in April of 1993. And in October of 1993, we both found out we were losing our jobs. So we started off on a crazy note. And here we are in the tunnel. This is a photo that was taken the day before they were about to cap the tunnel shaft. And I just had the opportunity. They had a photographer, and somebody said, "Do you want to go down?" And I said, "Absolutely. We've got to document this." So Jeff and I just celebrated 32 years of marriage, and it's been successful so far.
Can I have the little lights back on? I can't read this in the dark. There we go. Okay, in August of 1968, 2 weeks after my 20th birthday, I joined Fermilab, which was called National Accelerator Laboratory at that point, and it became Fermilab once we got the machine working, and then it was named after Enrico Fermi. So it was the first year of existence, and I was employee number 255 there. And I started out as the start of my professional career. I started out as a technician from DeVry, and so that was run by Universities Research Association, also known as URA, which was chosen by the Atomic Energy Commission at that point, it's a different name now, to build and operate the facility. So I was still there in 1968 when Texas was chosen for the SSC, and it was very disappointing because we all at Fermilab thought it was supposed to be up there because we had all the machines that were necessary to go into the big ring up at Fermilab and all the equipment, high rise. So there was a couple $2 billion worth of equipment there. But then in January of 1989, the Department of Energy entered into a contract with URA to be the partners with EG&G and Schwitters to build and operate the facility. So that's who I was working for. So suddenly my interest changed. I had one of the chief technical officer for the acceleration division was a lady by the name of Helen Edwards. I had worked with her for many years up at Fermilab, and she was in charge of the technical side of the Super Collider. So I said, Helen, you got room for me? So I came down here and I just didn't want to miss being part of that. So I came into this building as employee number 12. The accelerator division that was going to build all this, I was the only employee of that group for the whole summer. And then in the fall, we really started getting it. Okay. So I was offered a job on April 11th of 1989, and started work on May 12th in a temporary position because Congress had not approved funding for the SSC yet. And then in the fall of '89, that happened. So then I stopped being on a temporary employee. So during that summer, I helped, since I was the only person, we needed more people. So the EG&G company was doing the personnel things. So I spent a lot of time reading resumes and separating them out into because they didn't know what kind of engineer we needed for this and that. And so I separated those all out so we could straighten those out and in appropriate categories and experience levels, and then we also had bozo files of lady with 223-page resume from Kansas of her way we should build a super collider. That was pretty interesting, and there was many more. And then I also was interviewing candidates, and we did that, and then I was also a major point of contact with Schwitters, which was the architectural engineering firm. They didn't know what was going to go in these buildings, so I tried to explain to them what was going to go in the buildings and the sizes so they could start doing that sorts of things with a tunnel. So in September of that year, '89, sold my home up in Illinois, brought my family to work down here, and I got a home in Arlington, and my daughter, who was a junior in high school at that point, going to senior, stayed up and lived with her aunt who was up there so she could go to the same high school. And then we brought her down, and at that point lost my wife. We didn't know. So that was a rough point for me. So then in 1990 we started working on all the site-specific designs, what everything needs to go in each building and things. And then there was things coming up with why did it cost more, right? There was a original design estimate of the cost of the Super Collider, and then when they made it site-specific for Texas, it was a lot more. The major thing was the whole site out there already existed up at Fermi Lab. So you have to make these particle beams, you have to accelerate them through different machines to get it up to the energy to go into the Super Collider. And all those machines were in place. The buildings, the machines were there working. There was high-rise building for offices, there was tech shops. Everything was up there, a couple $2 billion worth of stuff. And in Texas, there was zero. So that was a big cost that got added on that was out of our control. At another laboratory out in the East Coast, at Brookhaven National Lab, they had a little machine they were trying to build, and they were trying to make the magnets in industry, but they were doing the prototypes in industry. And they didn't really know what they needed for the magnets. So the magnets kept not working quite right, but yet they were still cranking them out. By the time they got to the point where they got the right magnet, they'd used up all the funds for the machine. So Congress says, nada, you're not getting any more, and they closed that project down. And so Fermi Lab got their superconducting super collider machine, which was a little bit smaller, and we got to build that up at Fermi Lab. And so it was kind of a freaky thing. Okay, so the DOE says you got to prove to us that you've got a company that can build these magnets and make them work in industry to do all this. So we had a thing called the ASST, Accelerator Systems String Test, which was a long building. Where did the? Yeah. Okay. So there's a long building here that's would be filled up with magnets and back up here, and that's this building there, and then these are some of the other buildings that are still there, yet they're today out at the site that a company has, but all the rest of this is all gone. This little oval here is the magnet delivery shaft. You saw that in the picture of the tunnel looking up. So that was an oval shape to take that long magnet. So you can see here's like a crane. So it's about, that oval hole was about the length of this room to be able to lower magnets down to the tunnel. The other shafts around the thing were just round ones. It was easy. So this was the state of the laboratory out there in 1989, 91, and 92 for the ASST project. So we built this, next slide please. Next slide. Here's a picture of some of the magnets that are in this little building, and the dignitaries that came to visit it, president, the laboratory director, Roy Schwitters, a congressman, and Joe Barton. Who else? The president's secretary there. And so they came and visited us on that string test in 1992. we were supposed to power this, get this string test, these magnets built by industry, all put together with refrigerators built by industry and everything to cool them down and run it to full power to prove it happened by October of '92. Next slide. So we completed this on August 14th, '92. And you can't read it very well here, but that's 6,500 amperes of DC current in the magnets. We ran it to 6,530. I was running the thing. So I set it to go a little bit higher than that, so there wouldn't be any question that it made 6,500. The guy that built this building, the construction guy that had a heart attack one day after it was finished. He was standing at the other end of the building and looked down the building, and he sees that the building's crooked. See those lights on the ceiling there? They're curving around. He didn't know it wasn't real obvious on the prints that was happening, but they had it all surveyed in. That's the curvature of the SSC tunnel. It mimics the curvature of the SSC tunnel. So that's how big that tunnel was to go around the arcs. So it looks like it's hardly curved, and that's the case. Okay. And I had worked on a similar project at Fermi Lab when we had our superconducting. We had a string test facility that we had there at Fermi Lab to prove that we had magnets that we were working before we built a bunch of them at the Fermi Lab thing. So, okay. So go to the next slide. So there was that oval tunnel where the magnets were going up in. Next slide. That goes back to the thing. So in October, after we got this all done and got the 1992 thing met, we were going great guns and doing everything, and then suddenly Congress voted us out of a job in October of 1993. And at that time, 20% of the project was done at less than 20% of the project cost estimate. So why the nay vote? There was jealousy from the states that lost. There was any number of guy from senator from New York, from Michigan, from Illinois, from Arizona. All those were sites, plus a bunch of other ones. And then the one guy even said we were wasting and spending money. We were in this big building that was way bigger than this. It was the old Revco drug warehouse in Waxahachie. And that was where all the accelerator division employees and scientists were. And we had, it was I think a 300,000 square foot building. We had 200,000 square foot of cubicles and about 100,000 square foot of laboratory space and some storage. There was so many cubicles that we had to put street names for the rows of cubicles because you didn't know where to find somebody. Oh, I'm on this street, you know, and there were no windows, and so the lab had rented some plants to put around, something like that, you know, at some of the corners around, and you know, there was maybe a dozen plants. That made the national news. They sent the congressman couldn't do that. They sent the general accounting office. They sent 80 people down there for 3 months on travel to find out we spent a couple $100 on renting some plants. But the guy on the news, ABC News, said they're wasting, they're buying these plants, and so all that sort of stuff happened. So at that point, we left, went and found a new job. I didn't want to go back to Fermi Lab and start over again. I had made more money by doing a lot more jobs at Fermi Lab, but they weren't going to recognize it. I was going to have to go back for the pay grade I was from 2 years before. And so I just went off to Austin and worked on some secret projects for the oil industry, and till we got the thing out, making little silicon sensors and things like that at a good pay rate. Next.
Talk quick. I think I 15 minutes. You do. I think 15 minutes. One thing that I don't think has been mentioned is the fact that with all of these buildings, it was still like a university campus. In the building, the one that you see with that looks like a warehouse that has no windows, there was a library, there was a cafeteria. In another building, we had medical facilities, so it really was like a campus. Anyway, let me start by saying that I started keeping a journal in 1976, and going back through that to kind of refresh my memory, on May the 5th, 1988, I had written, "If we do get the SSC, I certainly want to be a part of it." So there you go. I began my job as Relocation Coordinator at the SSC Lab on September the 11th of 1989. But prior to that, I had been working with Catherine at TNRLC and with Kathy, whatever her name was, from the North Texas Commission, developing tours for those who were coming to work at the SSC. And the tours were to promote Ellis County and the Metroplex. And it was like a 5-hour drive, because they'd meet us in DeSoto at the offices there, and then we'd come down to Ellis County and hit Midlothian, Waxahachie, Ennis, or in reverse order, and then we'd go up and we'd hit DeSoto, Duncanville, Cedar Hill, and Lancaster, and then go into Dallas. And we never went north of SMU, but just to show them that there was a variety, that anything they wanted, they could have in Texas. Probably right now is a good time to mention one of the tours that I gave, and it just stands out in my memory, was to the wife of one of the physicists, and we had met them when our little group went out to give a dog and pony show at the Central Design Group at Berkeley in California. And this lady, I was taking her around, but before we ever really got in the car and got going, she said, "I want to ask you about doctors." I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "Does Texas have doctors or just veterinarians?" And then later, when I was driving her around and we went through Waxahachie, we drove in front of the Waxahachie newspaper, and she said, "Waxahachie Daily Light. What kind of church is that?" So, and another lady who lived in she must have told me 10 times she lived in a Frank Lloyd Wright house in Chicago. And I was bragging about the Meadows Museum at SMU having such a wonderful collection of Spanish art. And second only in the United States to, I think it's the New York Spanish Historical Society or something like that. And after that, it was the Prado. And she looked at me when I said, you know, wonderful collection of Spanish art, and she just sneered at me, and she really, well, we tackled that by sicking Genevieve Holmes on her and arranging for a private tour and lunch at SMU at the Meadows Museum. So we tried to please everyone. So anyway, we had relocation offices, but they moved us around. They relocated us so many times up and down Hampton Road into this building or that building. But finally, we ended up in this building here where personnel was. And we probably got there in the summer of 1992. Fortunately, I was given a wonderful clerical assistant, Vicki Alexander, and we kind of settled in. Now, as Jeff was mentioning about the cubicles, we actually had like a space that took up 4 cubicles, so we really felt privileged to be there. And there we could meet with the people who were relocating. We could actually sit down at a table and visit with them. So it was our job to coordinate not only with other people in the personnel department, processing everything, including their papers that they needed to come work in the country, but we also had to deal with the travel department. We had a full-blown travel agency at the lab. We had to work with finance, we had to work with procurement, and then we also had to work with the division heads, like the accelerator division head, the magnet division head, the directorate division head, administrative. Anyway, and the paperwork was awful. But the cool thing was everybody had a Macintosh computer. I mean, I asked, will I have a secretary? And, oh, yeah, you'll have all the help you need. It was a Macintosh computer. But they had classes all day, every day, with whatever program you needed to learn. So I learned Word and Excel and who knows what else. But anyway, it was really an asset when it came to looking for a job afterwards as a cowgirl at a ranch. Anyway, so it was our job to coordinate. Like if someone was hired, and we had about an average of 30 people a month just coming on, permanently full-time. And we would have to arrange, get all the signatures that we needed. We'd have to arrange a house hunting trip, and their travel, temporary housing. They got 30 days in temporary housing in corporate apartments. We had about 60 corporate apartments up in the DeSoto, Duncanville area. And we were getting ready to get a bunch more then in Ellis County when the project was killed. But we had temporary housing, transportation, and reimbursements for people who were relocating, for the guest scientists and engineers, and for the guest collaborators. Probably in my whole time there, I dealt with 800 people. A lot has been, I've read more lately about the differing management styles at the SSC. And for example, one like Bob Pearson was in charge of administration. He was retired Texas Instruments. Doug Kreitz, who was one of my supervisors, he was head of personnel, and he was basically a 43-year-old former hippie at Berkeley. Mary, my immediate supervisor, worked for EG&G, and they provided corporate support for the military. So she came from a military background. And then not to mention that we had Department of Energy, URA, and all the physicists all doing their own thing. So after a couple of years, we adopted a management style called TQM, Total Quality Management, and that was to ensure that everybody was on the same page. Like I said, the paperwork was overwhelming. One of the rewards, the biggest reward, obviously was not the paperwork, but I got to deal with the guest scientists, guest engineers, and collaborators who came to work at the SSC. I mean, they came from, let me read off the countries: Romania, China, Germany, India, Russia, England, Holland, Italy, Argentina. On top of that, we had Texas locals who came to work, and then the people from all the different labs in the United States, from Los Alamos and what was it, Brookhaven, and Fermi, etc. So we really got to know all these people. And for the most part, those who came in from out of the country were so excited to be coming to Texas to work. And it was fun. By then, Bill and I were living out at our ranch in Bristol, or between Crisp and Bristol, up on a high hill, and we would have people in. One evening, Liana Barici, one of our got to be close friends, she and her husband were from Romania, and we decided to co-host a dinner party, and we must have had 6 or 7 different countries represented. And what struck everybody was the vastness of being able to see 360 degrees, from that hill, in all different directions. And the sky. If you think of some of these European towns or cities that are just narrow little streets, and you're walking down them, and there are buildings on each side, and you have to look up to see the sky. Anyway, I want to tell you just a few little anecdotes from dealing with some of these people. The very first tour that I ever gave, I think, other than the 2 ladies that I mentioned, was a guy named Stephen Pegg, who came from Berkeley also. And he was, we were driving, it was March, it was gorgeous, spring was in the air, everything was about to bloom, and then he asked about the Texas weather. And Mother Nature decided to show him about the Texas weather. And this humongous, this is the end of March, and this humongous ice storm came in, and he couldn't even get back to California because of it. Another interesting, there was a scientist that was in one of the corporate apartments on the 3rd floor, and I guess he was into sushi before everybody else I knew was into sushi, and he had put the sushi, or the whatever it was, in his kitchen sink and turned on the faucet and forgot to turn it off. So we were having to deal with the bottom, the 1st and 2nd floor getting flooded. And that was our very first event as far as relocation. Then the cutest guys, 3 young Russians. Now these guys were probably in their 30s. They were scientists from the lab Novosibirsk in Siberia. It looked like they'd never been in the sun at all. They were the palest guys. And I think I mentioned that people had a rent car for 30 days. Well, they were going down to Waxahachie. And they come into my office afterwards. Sugar? I'm like, yes, what is it? We have car accident. I'm like, what happened? Was anybody hurt? No, but is it customary for someone to drive, what's the word, naked? Nude? So they had been hit, as they exited onto the service road, they had been hit by someone who was in a big rush to get the hell out of Dodge, and he had no clothes on whatsoever. And then there was a group of scientists from China, and they had all piled into their rent car and decided to go to Oklahoma. Well, they come in and the same thing, sugar, we have accident. Well, did you call the police? No. But what happened was, I don't know if they thought cruise control was automatic pilot, but they had gone off the highway, fortunately a country road, I guess, and rolled down the embankment. I said, did you call the police? No, we straightened the car, get in, drive back up, and keep on going. So, there was a guest engineer from Bulgaria, and we had, his wife Flora was going to join him, and we had arranged to have a king-size bed in their apartment, their corporate apartment. He came storming in. King-size bed? You sleep with your mistress in a king-size bed, not your wife. So we had to make changes there. One of the cutest, let me tell you about this. There was a British scientist or engineer who came from, I think he must have been in Flagstaff when he was relocating. And he had told me that he had a small private plane and he was bringing that with him. Other people had horses and who knows, furniture collections, etc. But anyway, and this guy, he decided on a December morning to take his son flying out of the Lancaster Airport, you know where that is, I think, to see the Christmas lights in the neighborhoods. Well, something happened, and we all woke up to news that this guy had perished in his plane in an accident. But on a happier note, or more cheerful note, it was fun to see how, they were, like I said, they were so excited about coming to Texas. Someone hosted a big party barbecue at a venue in Midlothian with music, and here came all these Chinese scientists in their brand new blue jeans that looked like so stiff that they could hardly walk. But anyway, and then to see them all out on the dance floor trying to learn to line dance to Achy Breaky Heart. And then there was this young German guy I think he was from Frankfurt. He and his wife were both working at the SSC. And he came in one day to show off his new felt Stetson hat. And I said, well, it is gorgeous, but this is August. And you don't wear felt hats in August. You need to save it for cooler weather. Anyway, of course, the bad news eventually came, and that Congress was killing the SSC, and the reactions were first shock, anger, tears, sorrow. We had Japanese there, loss of face, and a feeling of betrayal by these people, for these people who had left their positions at home, and picked up their families, moved everything down here, and then all of a sudden, our politics, and it was just one politician from Louisiana rightly said it was a sad day for science in the United States of America. And after dealing with 2 or 3 people who had to go, who were jobless. Well, the whole atmosphere was pretty dismal, but and then I just decided to move on to other things. So that was it.
It's good to see such a nice turnout for tonight's talk, and I happen to know that there are representatives from 2 different families who have had their family farms severely impacted by the SSC. So I hope this all interests you. brought a couple of books that I used in documenting the historic resources of Ellis County. This is a book on Sears houses. Some of you may know that Sears, you used to could order a house and it would be delivered. I actually have 3 books. This is a book that I used a great deal in documenting the structures that were here in Ellis County. It's a field guide to American houses, and Virginia and Lee McAllister wrote it, and it's a book that I highly encourage anybody who has an interest in wanting to know what type of house, what style their house is, to get a copy of this. I know that the Historic Landmark Board has multiple copies. And the third book is the report of the historic resources of Ellis County that was done by Hardy Heck Moore. The authors were it was done for the U.S. Department of Energy. The authors were Daniel Hardy, Marlene Heck, David Moore, and Michael Clark. The contributors were Linda Ferguson, Bridget Metzger, Ralph Newland, Ed Galloway, and myself, Bruce Fowler. I want to read to you from the abstract. A historic resources survey of Ellis County, Texas, in support of the Superconducting Super Collider Laboratory program was conducted by Hardy Heck Moore of Austin, Texas, from October 1989 to April of 1990. The survey was undertaken pursuant to Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. All field investigations were conducted from public right-of-way and were concentrated in areas of the county not previously surveyed, that is rural and outside of the city limits of Waxahachie and Ennis, Texas. As a result of this effort, 3,714 previously unrecorded historic resources were identified and documented in this county. Of the total, 465 appear to be eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places due to their architectural significance and our known association with important trends or events in local history. The project was done in phases. I worked on 2 of the phases. First, with a windshield survey from which high priority structures were identified that were directly impacted by the SSC and that were eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. HABS drawings, Historic American Building Surveys drawings, were done of these particular structures. Using the forms shown, surveyors documented properties based on age, architectural integrity, plan types and styles, and known historical associations. Each property received a preliminary priority rating based upon a 3-level classification system of high, medium, and low. Team members photographed all sites with 35mm black and white film. Supplemental color slide photographs were taken of the more important structures. For potential archaeological review, crew members also noted those properties that were indicated on the base USGS maps but no longer extant. Property types, categories, and subsets were domestic buildings, commercial buildings, institutional buildings, engineering structures, industrial buildings, landscape features, cemeteries, parks, memorials, and hedgerows. This is the ring, and those are the structures that we have selected to show you. We picked some of the more interesting structures here in Ellis County, and I want to start with the one nearest to us, which is the Roberts Dolezal farmstead over near Garrett. The Roberts Dolezal farmstead, parts of which date to the 1880s, include a residence, a barn, 5 small outbuildings, and a well. The house was built about 1880 when Jefferson D. Roberts, a Mississippi native, purchased this property in the Claiborne-Garrett survey. Roberts, like most residents of the area, was a farmer and began to grow cotton during the boom years of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He sold the land in 1913, and Joe Dolezal purchased it 4 years later. Dolezal, also a farmer, was a Bohemian Czech immigrant who came to the United States in 1902. He was one of a large number of Eastern Europeans who settled in eastern Ellis County during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Today, the descendants of such immigrants comprise a significant portion of the local population. During the 1920s, Dolezal added the Craftsman bungalow porch to the house and erected most of the extant outbuildings. He sold the property to his son in 1949. The farmstead illustrates the operation of owner-occupied farm in eastern Ellis County. It also represents how Eastern Europeans settled in Ellis County in the early 20th century and how they assimilated into American society and culture. I'll go very quickly through the photographs, and I want to thank David Sancha for locating the black and white photos that we took and the Historic American Building Survey drawings through the Library of Congress and online. And then I also want to thank him for putting all of these onto the slides so that I could share them with you. These are photographs of the interior and the exterior of the Dolezal house, and the photograph on the second photograph at the top kind of gives you an idea of what the 1880 house was, and then the photograph at the extreme left gives you an idea of the 1920s arts and crafts porch that was put on it. This is the barn that was such a nice barn that when the Super Collider, what we ended up doing with this barn is we moved it to the Farrer House, and it was going to be used as part of the cultural center that we were planning on making. Could we go to the next slide, please? Oh, I should have also mentioned that I guess go back, because I should have mentioned that in the barn there were lots of farm equipment from the 19th century that we also acquired for the Heritage Society. Now go on to the next. Since we're going kind of around the ring, I want to mention that I found two houses that were Sears houses that were here in Ellis County, and hopefully they still are. The house, the Hamilton on the left, is out near India, and the Elsmore on the right is out near Bristol. The Maxwell farmstead, which is over at Boz. Could we have the lights up just a little bit? This domestic building is a noteworthy local example of late 19th century vernacular house with modest Gothic revival and Queen Anne stylistic features. The multiple gable front is indicative of the Gothic revival style, while the polygonal end room is typically associated with Queen Anne style. Although the application of synthetic siding and the replacement of original porch supports with metal pipes detract from the structure's overall historic character, but not severe enough to compromise its integrity. The Maxwell house was bought by Dana Cody, and salvaged parts were used, and they were going to be used, and they were stored in the Cody's building in downtown Ennis, which unfortunately burned in the 1990s. So we lost that after all the effort that Dana had gone to try to save those things. The next house is the B.F. Forrester farmstead, and this structure has Gothic revival detailing, which suggests a late 19th century date of construction. The vertical emphasis provided by the front gables is indicative of the style. The only apparent alteration is the absence of the upper deck railing. The house therefore retains much of its historic character and integrity. Center passage houses were among the most popular vernacular house forms in Ellis County during the 19th century, and this structure is one of the best local examples. Benjamin F. Forrester built this dwelling circa 1885, and the lady who is standing in the blue dress is Mrs. McGregor, and the lady in the white is her daughter, Diana, and I was so fortunate to meet Mrs. McGregor because Mrs. McGregor is the granddaughter of the Foresters, and she has furniture from the house that was original at her house, which she showed me. I'll go on to the next, and these are, again, the black and white slides of the Forester house. I do want to mention that unfortunately, when the Forester house was on the truck to be moved, the various houses that were removed from their original sites and were on trucks, someone, an arsonist, burned the house. So unfortunately, we've lost the Forester house. But the other house is the J.M. Dunaway house, and Mrs. McGregor is in this slide because these were her other grandparents. And she has a lot of furniture from the Dunaway house, and I'll just on a happy note, the Dunaway house has been saved and Diana owns it, and it was moved to some other property that they have. Could we go? The Dunaway house, this is Mr. and Mrs. J.M. Dunaway, and the wedding photograph was Ruth Dunaway, and it was a 1920s wedding. But the photograph of the house, the Dunaway house that only has one gable, is in the Ellis County history book, the Memorial and Biographical History. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important is that all of the trees that you see in the front yard, and even the ones that are shaped up, are bodark. And bodark was seen, this photograph was taken after 1876. And in 1874, barbed wire was invented and patented. So prior to 1874, they didn't have barbed wire. What they used were hedgerows. And thousands of bushels of bodark trees were shipped into Ellis County and the prairies to be used as hedgerows. And one of the things that we did is we documented some of those hedgerows. But this is the only example that I know of where bodarks were used as ornamental landscape features. So if we could go on to the next slide. These are the black and white slides from the survey. This is a photograph of the Habs drawings, or one of the Habs drawings. That's Mrs. McGregor and myself standing next to the stairway, which is drawn. But the little sketch up in the top, Mrs. McGregor was telling me, I made that little sketch while we were there talking, because she was telling me what the rooms were used for historically and what items of furniture were in the house. And then later on, she invited me for lunch over at her house, and so I went and we had a wonderful lunch of beans and cornbread and iced tea, and it was like such a Texas time. It was like being with one of my great aunts. It was wonderful. And I got to see all the beautiful furniture that used to be in the Dunaway house, which I imagine a lot of it Diana probably has now. This is the Habs drawings in the upper left that I was talking about, and there's the Dunaway house on the truck. I was over there the day that it was moved, and then this is the Dunaway garage. This is the Boz Gin. This structure is the office and scales of the Five Points Gin Co-op, a well-preserved gin complex in west central Ellis County. Gins such as this one played a pivotal role in the county's cotton boom of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Although many gins still stand throughout the county, this gin and its associated outbuildings are among the most intact and least altered. Could we go on to the next slide? I've included the 1936 centennial marker of Edward Tarrant's plantation because, as you can read, the veteran of the War of 1812, pioneer Indian fighter, commander of Texas frontier troops, statesman of vision. The house was built in 1845. Nearby, he built the first mill. The house is gone, by the way, in Ellis County. Here he resided until his death, August of 1858. Erected by the state of Texas in 1936. And the reason I included this is that most people don't realize that Forreston was originally the Howes settlement, and General Edward Tarrant was the son-in-law of the Howes. And so the first settlement in Ellis County was over near Forreston, and that's where I found this marker. It was back on, now it has a fence around it, but at that time it was just back in a field, and Margaret Felty asked me to go out and do a reconnaissance to find out if there's anything historical. And I walk out there, and lo and behold, here's this marker, Texas Centennial. So if we could go on to the next one. The next one that I've included is the T.C. Neal plantation site, because both of these plantations were affected by the Super Collider, and the Thomas Neal. Most people don't realize that there was a 10,000-acre cotton plantation right outside of Ennis, where the Texas Motorplex is. Right across the street from the Texas Motorplex was the house, and the 10,000 acres. Thomas Neal died during the war of 1861 to 65, and then his wife remarried Mr. Getzendaner. So all that you hear about the Getzendaners in Waxahachie is actually based on the Thomas Neal plantation, because she ended up with 5,000 acres of the 10,000 acres. And then the Templeton-McCandless Historic District in Ennis is based on the other 5,000 acres, which the Templetons, Frank Templeton married Maddie Neal, and Maddie Neal was the daughter who inherited the other 5,000 acres. So there's a lot of history right here in Ellis County that goes way back to the 1850s. So if we could go on to the next slide. This house is very personal to me. It's the George Cunningham house from the mid-1850s. And the reason it's personal to me is that David and I purchased this house at the auction for the Super Collider properties and totally dismantled it and brought it over to our farm just south of Alma. And one of the reasons why it's so important, it was the home of the surveyor, George Cunningham, who laid out Ellis County in 1850. So let me get to... This domestic building is a good local example of a two-room house. Similar houses were built in great numbers during the 19th and early 20th centuries, making the two-room house one of the common vernacular house forms in the region. This structure, which is modestly detailed and has little stylistic ornamentation, is one of the best preserved examples of its kind in Ellis County. The house features both board and batten and balloon frame construction. And at the time that this was written, we did not know until we dismantled it that it's actually a timber frame house. And if you could go to the next slide, well, here's the photos we took, but to the next slide, this is when we're dismantling the house, and if you notice the joists, the floor joists are actually tree trunks that have just been shaped across the top to put the floorboards on, and you can see the timber frame that is shaped vertical and the diagonal, and the diagonals were mortise and tenon in to give it greater strength, and you can see the pegs that were used to secure it. It was a wonderful house. Could you go to the next slide, please? These are the Habs drawings of the Cunningham house, and over to the right, the lower right, you can see the plan, and that's the original two rooms, with three small rooms behind the original two rooms, which were 16-foot square with 12-foot ceilings. But the additions were done in the 1870s, so we did not save the additions. We only saved the original 1850s structure. And I want to mention that the middle room in the back on the plan, when you walked into that room, there was just a wonderful feeling. And the reason there was such a wonderful feeling in that room, the room was 10 foot by 16 foot. And that is the golden mean ratio of human proportion of 1 to 1.6, which is an architectural ratio that creates beautiful spaces. And it was amazing. It's a very simple house, but this one room it just was beautiful. And you can see how the addition, the 2 rooms are on the left, and then they added a 3rd room and then an L. If you could go to the next slide. This is Dana. I photographed her while she was photographing the house, and you can see the corner blocks around the door have little squares and some detailing. This house had minimal Greek Revival detailing, but it was very special that a house built in the 1850s on the prairies in a county that was only founded in 1850 would have this pretense to style. On the right, the Heritage Society has been supportive of historic preservation for so long, well, ever since its inception. And these are all Heritage Society members, Jerry and Bill Hutmaker, Rick Seapock, David Sacha, and myself. And we were over at the Maxwell House that day helping salvage beams that took 5 or 6 of us to move. And we put them on a truck and brought them over to the Farrer House to be used under the Farrer House. So I think this is a good slide to end on because it brings the Super Collider to the Heritage Society, and we thank you for being out here tonight.